Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Despotakis. I am the Director of Public and Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association. Glad to be part of the Music is Education Coalition, and so glad to have you all here tonight for our January webinar as we start off the new year. Few things of housekeeping before we start. If I can get the slide to advance. Throughout our webinar tonight, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature. You can find that at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Sometimes if you don't see it, if you hit more, you will see it in that menu. We will try to answer questions in the chat. And if there are any that are relevant to the conversation, and the speaker can answer right away, we will, or if they can be answered in the chat, we will do that as well. And then we will stay on, the members of the coalition, for about 5 minutes after the end of the call to address any other questions that you might have that you would want a one-on-one answer, or we can follow up through email with things that you put in the chat. So let's keep that in mind. And again, that's using the Q&A feature. So today we're talking about the 2026 state legislative session in all of your states, and we're going to do that in a number of ways. So first of all, we're going to talk about the survey of states, one which was done back in March, one was just done here very recently. We're going to look at that. We're going to take a little bit of a dive into what's happening in the state of Indiana with their arts education network. And then we're going to be talking about state of the state addresses. What are they? When is yours? How you can get involved with actually a real life example of an arts advocate who got involved. So with that, again, I'll just remind you, questions, use the Q&A feature. And to begin, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Morrison, the data guru, among many other things, who can talk about the survey that was recently done. Bob?
Great. Thank you, Mark, and welcome. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this evening, our monthly webinar of the Music is Education Coalition. And this slide says it all. States are where the action is. And that's what we're focusing on here through this work, because while a lot of folks pay attention to what's happening at the national level, the states are where the action really is. We don't have one education system in the United States. We have 50 education systems in the United States. They're unique. They have their own unique circumstances, their own idiosyncrasies. So it's really important to take a state-by-state approach when we start talking about advocacy. So what we did is initially in the spring, we did a survey of states and we shared that information out in September. And then in November, we decided that it would be a good idea to do this again to see what has changed. And so what you're going to see is what are the changes between the two periods of from the spring or late winter, spring to just in December as we tee up what's happening for 2026. So with that, let's dig in. So in March of 2025, the top concerns from the states were decreases to state education funding, curricular narrowing and mandates like STEM and CTE, workforce focus that excludes arts education, and then the teacher shortage and licensure. And you'll see the orange and the red one are highlighted there because those are going to change. So when we look at the fall results, the fall priorities were narrowing of the curriculum, moved to the top spot. Workforce skills, that focus that excludes the arts, that became in number 2. Graduation pathways, that was new to the list, at least this high up, as well as a decrease to state education funding. And what's interesting here is if we go to the next slide, you'll see that the top 3 are really I look at these as being related. The narrowing of the curriculum is driven by the workforce focus that excludes the arts, and that is largely driven by these discussions around graduation pathways. So those kind of combine to work together, in what's happening within our states. So when we look at the spring non-arts mandates that people were concerned about. The big concerns were release time for religious programs, graduation requirement shifts, and fine arts requirements removals, meaning in some places where the fine arts requirements are being eliminated. And when we look at where we are in the fall, you'll see that graduation requirement shifts and release time for religious programs remain, but time taken by the focus on response to intervention, social emotional learning, and other advisory periods in the school day are beginning to take time away, as well as then the perception of the arts as being expendable, as well as these cultural and political pressures that are coming up. So those came up as some of the concerns in the fall. When we look at the unprompted top concerns from the spring. So we'll just say, based on your point of view, what are the top three things that you think are the biggest issues? Budget and teacher pay, support from administration, curricular narrowing and curriculum requirements, and teacher pipeline issues. Those were the priorities. And when we look at the fall, you'll see that we now have the addition of program visibility and devaluation. So the respondents were repeatedly cited insufficient funding at the district and state level, and that was leading to reduction in staff, instructional time, equipment maintenance, and performance opportunities. The issue around the graduation requirements, that there are policy shifts that are occurring that are sidelining the arts. And in some cases, arts requirements are being weakened or waived in favor of career-ready courses or STEM priorities. Teacher availability, teacher shortages, obviously, are complicating issues that continue to be an issue out there, as well as these certification barriers. And then the program visibility. Arts programs are increasingly seen as supplemental rather than essential. And this comes from a lack of institutional support from administrators, policymakers, that kind of weaken that fundamental foundation that we have. So when we look at the next slide, the key takeaway from all of this are these interlocking challenges, and that's the big difference is now we're seeing these things that are combining together the insufficient funding, weakened policy protections, the staffing gaps, cultural undervaluing. These are all undermining what's happening. So we need to be strategic, we need to be sustained, and we need to focus statewide on this. So to do that, the strategic priorities that came out from the survey in the fall really, I think, encapsulate what the focus should be for all of us. And I think it starts first and foremost, we have to protect arts education as a graduation requirement. Wherever that is a standalone graduation requirement or even a blended graduation requirement, that graduation requirement is critical to helping us support and strengthen our program. So I liken that as, that's the line at all costs. We have to defend the arts education graduation requirement. We need to address the workforce skills framing. There's a lot of discussion around workforce skills that has been brought up. So we need to have better arguments. We need to make sure that we are connecting those arguments to the benefits and the impact that music and arts education already has. But we have to rebuild the arts educator pipeline. And there's a lot of work that's going on with the Teach Music Coalition and the MPTI initiative from NAFME that support rebuilding that educator pipeline. But you need to be aware of those opportunities so that you can share that within your state. Support for local and state level advocacy, as well as to advocate for dedicated and equitable funding. We then asked, well, what are your needs? What do the states need to help them be able to address some of these issues? And the state needs that popped up were these 5 areas. Coordination and leadership at the state level. Many leaders felt that they were lacking, the central voice or hub coordinating some of the activity in their state. That's not to say that it's not happening, but maybe those state leaders that responded weren't aware of what was happening. So making that visible is really important. Ready to use advocacy materials around templates, messaging, and tools. Many said they lacked the time or tools to create effective advocacy materials, and we'll talk about where some of those resources are for you. Coaching, mentorship, and peer support. Many leaders stepped into these advocacy roles for the first time without really formal support. And so they expressed a desire to have mentoring opportunities, one-on-one kind of coaching to assist them to become more effective. So that's certainly something that we'll be looking at. Help navigating policy and funding pathways. They were unsure how state policies were changing or how to respond effectively. And I know in our next webinar, and Amanda will speak to this in a little bit, there's some materials that will be coming out in late January, early February that will help you on the policy front. And then stronger messaging and data tools. Folks are really looking for ways that they can use data and storytelling to maximize and drive home the points about advocacy. So they're really looking for assistance that will bring coaching, tools, and structure to assist them to be more effective in their efforts to advocate on behalf of music and arts education. And with that, there are 9 recommendations that came out from the survey. And these are recommendations that we're going to be looking at, but it's also something that everyone should be looking at and thinking about as we move forward. The first is strengthening statewide advocacy, leadership, and coordination. That's something that I think that we can look at and work on together, through all of our resources, as well as some of the best practices that are out there across the country. This is an interesting idea, create an advocacy coaching and peer mentorship network. We know that there are programs. NAFME has their ALF leadership, state leadership group, and there are other groups that come together, but folks are really looking for that coaching and peer mentorship. And so I think that's something that we'll be exploring further. Develop a centralized advocacy toolkit library. We'll touch on that in a little bit. Launching messaging and storytelling initiatives. Creating shared messaging frameworks that connect arts to workforce skills, SEL, equity, chronic absenteeism. Maybe think about an art story bank that could host some of this information. The next one is to provide a clear policy map and navigation tools. And I think that Amanda will be touching on that with what they'll be releasing later this month. Build and sustain data infrastructure, where we can use data to help tell the stories. We want to defend and expand the graduation requirements for our states, as well as invest in that teacher pipeline to make sure that we have the arts educators that we need to move forward, and that we also need to mobilize our school boards and our local decision makers. And we have some new tools that we've built that are going to be available for you to use as a result of some of these recommendations. So the final takeaways on this are really that the risks are increasing from what we saw back in the spring. So this is really looking at the difference between the spring and the fall. The risks are increasing and becoming more diffuse. Policy shifts are accelerating. So risks are increasing, policy shifts are accelerating, leaders are seeking more structure. There is isolation. Some people feel that they're more isolated than they have been, but there's also a very strong sense of resolve that they're willing to tackle this. They just need some help and support, and stronger messaging and data tools to assist folks at the state level. So it makes it clear that our leaders are motivated, but they need backup. And so these recommendations are not abstract goals, but really a blueprint for what we can do to support what's happening at the state level, to support state level advocacy. And one of the tools that are available to you is the Music is Education Coalition website at musiciseducation.org. We have lots of resources and tools that we've developed there, but one of the new tools that we've been refining over the past 9 months is our Carl B chatbot. And Carl B is your music advocacy assistant. It's a chatbot that is on the website. It's curated with the latest and greatest information regarding music and arts education advocacy tools. And we've updated it based on what the survey said. We've added additional information for how to work with your school boards, understanding the school boards and the school board process and how to engage with school board members, as well as monitoring the school budget process. What is that process and what role can you play? That, along with workforce skills and creating advocacy campaigns and messaging templates, all that information is available on the Carl B tool. So I would encourage you to take Carl for a test drive at your convenience. So with that, I'm going to stop because I think we're going to do a little bit of Q&A with the time that we have remaining before we move on to our good friends in Indiana. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mark and Ann, and answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I'll bring Ann Fennell in here from California Music Educators Association. If anyone has any questions on what Bob just shared, there was a lot of information. Feel free to put that in the chat. Bob, I just want to highlight one of the things that I took away from this. I think it's something that we've talked about in advocacy for a long time, but what you're showing totally reinforces it, and it reinforces the work that we are doing here, and that is the importance of working together at the state and local level. We've spent a lot of time at the federal level advocating and talking about funding, but now it's actually about policy, about how things are enacted in a state. And it's now is not the time to silo. Now is the time to join together with other arts disciplines and with other music educators and music advocates in your state. Am I on the right path there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, this is where those decisions are made. This education policy at the states are made at the state level, and every state is a little bit different. And I think that it's really important that we acknowledge that it's not just a one size fits all, that it really is unique to each and every state. We've talked about, I mean, the folks in Indiana, were one of the first states that had to deal with kind of the workforce pathways and the impact that had on their particular requirements for arts education. We saw that happen in Oklahoma as well. In other states, it's different. It may be a funding issue. In other states, it may be issues around how they're treating CTE credit courses in relationship to the arts, or how they're not treating them in relationship to the arts. So I think all of these things are important, and I think one of the nice tools that we're going to be able to have that NAFME will be presenting on at our next meeting is addressing some of the issues around, well, what are some of the policies that are out there? What are model policies? What can you learn from one state that may be able to be replicated, right? We've been hearing about how Massachusetts is now trying to replicate what they did in California with Proposition 28. That's where, okay, oh, wow, they did something cool over in that state. Maybe that's applicable to me over here. And maybe there's something that we can do with it. Something similar that we did here in New Jersey was with passing legislation about grade weighting, ensuring that arts education is weighted equally with other courses of same rigor. Because prior to that, it was up to local school counselors. They would just arbitrarily decide what the weighting was for a music course, and that would it would create problems for our students because students were having to choose between their GPA and being involved in their arts course. And when you have the arts courses now being treated with equal weighting, they don't have to make those selections. And so in New Jersey's case, the year after that law went into effect, we saw a 10% increase in arts enrollment at the high school level, just like that. And that was just through the passing of a particular piece of legislation. So every state's different, but there are things that you can learn from other states that you may be able to apply to your own.
Thanks for that, Bob. And to that point in Massachusetts, I was called to say, "Hey, we're doing this. What did you learn?" And I was able to send all of the mistakes that California made so that they don't repeat those, right? Because we learn the moment something falls into place. And I think that's
Absolutely.
very important. And that ties me to something that needs to happen so that we can ensure that these things take place and that support arts education. And that is that relationships have to come first. Because the moment you see any of these issues, it's almost too late. Very hard to reverse legislation, right? So if you can think of the possibilities of building relationships now, if you don't see an issue, this is the time to reach out and introduce yourself to your state, your Department of Education, to your local legislators. This is the time to say, hey, come to our concerts, come to our art reveal, all these opportunities to start building those relationships so that they know you when issues come, they know your voice, they know your organization, they know what you're about. Otherwise, we become panic driven. And I have to say this, you might not see the law, but there's something brewing in every state. So whatever you might just go in with big questions into your state legislature where you can get into their proposed laws and start to see where both parties are heading so that we can be proactive in this. Some of the things that have happened in California, it was because there was some situation that was happening that I would happen to attend a meeting, did a deep dive and found, oh my goodness, this is going to happen. But that I was lucky that I could preempt it in that way. I think that's happening in every state. And with things that are happening so quickly at the federal level, guaranteed it's going to happen at the state level. So
Well,
proactively create those
yeah, and
relationships.
I think that's a really good point, and particularly, at the state level, I found, several years ago when I was running Arts Ed New Jersey, I found that the conversations that I would have with our school boards association leadership, with our principals association leadership, with our teachers union leadership, with our business administrators leadership, the educational agencies or organizations at the state level that are really the ones that drive education policy, being in that mix, cultivating those relationships will give you eyes and ears on what's happening because they all have paid lobbyists, right? And not every state is going to have a paid lobbyist, but you can work with those other associations to say, hey, will you keep an eye on any arts education bills that might be proposed? Will you send me a heads up when they hit your radar screen? Or they also may be able to counsel you on a strategy that if you're trying to implement some sort of policy, they'll be able to talk you through, okay, how do you craft an approach to do this? And by the way, when you're doing it, you're also gaining their support because if you go to legislature and you can then say, oh, and by the way, all the other education associations are behind this, they're more likely to support it than not. So it absolutely building those relationships when you're not in a crisis is really, really important so that you can be proactive. And by the way, the same approach works for school boards. Go to school board meetings not when you need something, but to be there to be seen, to develop those relationships so that when the point comes and you need something, you'll already have established those relationships. And the last thing that I'll share related to that is nobody shows up to a school board meeting to say thank you. So show up to a school board meeting and say, hey, thank you for the money that you provided so that we could go on this trip, or thank you for the additional instruments that we were able to purchase this year, or thank you for coming and attending our concerts, or go to invite them to attend the concerts, or have students play for them. That's the way you build the rapport and the relationships that you can then call on when you actually need something. You don't want to have your first interaction be, hey, hello, my name is Bob, and I need you to do something for me.
I'm going to add one more point to this, and that is the parent teacher associations in the state. We are members in
Absolutely.
California of our state teacher association. And we would sit there, we rotate who has the booth for 3 days, and we sit there and talk to the parents. I can tell you that I could call up our state parent teacher association and they would have our backs. And I
Yeah.
also know that they're the ones that are doing the due diligence for their children. These parents care so much that they give up days to learn more about leadership. And I know that those groups are key in our relationship building as well.
And my last point on this is parents are school board members too, and they have kids in programs. And most of the parents either themselves were involved in arts programs or their kids were involved in arts programs. So that there is something that you can connect with. You can find that intersection where you can have a conversation and meet them on something that means something of value to them personally because either their own involvement or their students' involvement.
Well, thank you, Bob, for dissecting all of that data for us and that wonderful advice. And thanks, Ann, for stepping in with some questions there. We're going to take a look now at we were talking about state level and coming together. We're going to take a look now at a great example of that happening in the state of Indiana. So delighted to bring in three folks who are making the Indiana Arts Education Network happen, and they're going to talk a little bit about that for us. Mike Kampfeis, Dr. Brian Widener, and Tim Cox. Guys, I'll turn it over to you. And folks, I will remind you, if you have some questions, comments about their work, please put it in the Q&A section. We'll have a little bit of time to talk to these three guys as they at the end of their presentation. So, guys, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Good evening, everybody. Mike Campi, Senior Vice President at Conn-Selmer and President of the Indiana Arts Education Network. I've been involved in this organization since about 2013. So I first want to give everyone some context as to how our state advocacy organization came together, where we're at today, and how it evolved. And would love to have Tim and Brian also share some real-time things that are going on within our state and some of the activities that are happening. And when I mean real-time, I mean they were both at the Secretary of Education earlier today. So back in 2013, the Indiana Arts Education Network came out of relationships through the Support Music Coalition. Mark Goff, many of you are probably familiar with Mark, former president of NAM, and from Pages Music in Indianapolis area. He basically took it upon himself to help put pieces together with Music Indie and other organizations within the state to form the Indiana Arts Education Network in what I would call a little bit of an informal way because we didn't have our own 501c3. We acted under the Indiana Music Education Association for many years, did a lot of successful advocacy through the ESSA era that with the Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015 and Music and Arts as part of well-rounded education going through that through 2019. The organization during the pandemic, we did what we could virtually and things kind of slowed down in regards to the organization itself. And then we found ourselves a year and a half ago a little bit blindsided by some of the policy that we're talking about. As Bob alluded to earlier, we're kind of leading the way, and Brian will talk a little bit about that later. But through what's been happening, we were able to activate earlier this year. The process started in about February. We started on the journey to become a 501c6, where we're an active lobbying organization for the arts within the state. Music for All has helped us in a big way through attorney help and support, and having Tim Cox as our executive director has been phenomenal, and having a very active board that we've put together this year. We've reinvigorated our activity in the state to be able to lean into, and based on what Bob presented, we have a lot of homework that's aligned with what we're doing. But just to share with everyone what our mission and vision is, and I'll have Tim talk a little bit more about the board structure. The mission currently of our Indiana Arts Education Network is to ensure that every Indiana student has reliable access to a well-rounded education that includes music and the arts. And our vision is the Indiana Arts Education Network has a vision for every Indiana child to reach their full potential so they will be equipped to lead successful lives and help make Indiana the best place in the country to live and work. If you go to the homepage of our website, which you can see each of us have it right above us here, you'll see workforce and workforce development pretty prominent within that site, as that is a big deal within the state right now. So we've taken a lot of action to reinvigorate this organization within the state. We have a very active board, and with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tim to talk about our board and further activity that we're doing there.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. So my name is Tim Cox. I work at Music for All as a director of educational outreach and serve as somewhat of an interim executive director as we figure out all of our pieces and parts and legally how we are able to do everything. So as Mike said, we kind of had to reactivate things because we got into the point where things were going well, and then all of a sudden there was a rug taken out, and it was like, oh no, they took away the arts requirements in Indiana. So if you're not aware, we had 2 credits that were required, and our governor came in and took those out. And so we're like, oh no. And that kind of happened, and we're like, oh, well, we weren't watching. And so we reorganized, and we decided that we need to get everybody to talk together. And so we've been working to really get industry folks involved. And so higher ed folks, so Dr. Widener and folks, and then obviously the nonprofit stuff, Music for All and Percussive Art Society here in Indiana is very, very big. So we have a new board. Our president, Mike, that you just met, our vice president, Randy Greenwell, who is the executive director of the Indiana State School Music Association. Randy and I were both band directors here in Indiana for 30 plus years. And so we kind of just had our noses to the grindstone and just taught every day and didn't really see this coming. And now that Randy's on the other side of it with me, I think we're able to do some things. Our secretary is Jennifer Witt. She works at Sweetwater. And so obviously everybody knows who Sweetwater is and what they do, but they certainly have jumped in and they want to be helpful in making sure that we are aware of what's going on and kind of helping to activate other folks in that industry spot. Our treasurer is Matt Carter from Visit Indy. And so Matt's been a longtime supporter of all the things here in Indiana, music and arts wise. And then our board of directors. So Joshua Simons from Percussive Art Society, Dr. Widener from Butler, James Stevens from Music for All, and Marielle Greenlee's arts and dance folks. She's connected very, very well in Indiana with all the dance folks. And then Jalissa Gasho from Yamaha is with us as well. So our goal was to just make sure that we are trying to reach out and get to know everybody in every space. So it's not just educators. It's not just Consumer folks here in Indiana with Sweetwater folks. And it's trying to make sure that we're talking to all the nonprofits. So Music for All is very heavily involved, as well as a lot of the other nonprofits here in Indiana. So that's been kind of our big focus. As Mike said, Dr. Widener and I actually had the chance to speak with the Secretary of Education here in Indiana because, as Ann has pointed out so eloquently, we are trying to rebuild a relationship that really wasn't there. And so things went incredibly well today. I haven't even had time to get a memo sent to everybody in our organization, just that we were very, very pleased with the fact that they're willing to talk to us and we can provide some help to them on how we're going to reframe the diploma discussion here in Indiana, which luckily Dr. Widener from Butler University has really dug in deep and knows all the policy in and outs. And we also are very blessed that we're able to hire and pay for a lobbyist here in Indiana, the Market Street Group, that kind of keeps us updated with all things legislative wise here in Indiana. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Dr. Widener.
Good evening, everybody. Again, Brian Widener. I'm an associate professor over at Butler University, and really came into this work. One of the other hats I wear is the policy coordinator for the Indiana Music Education Association. So a quick 30-second history review of what's gone on here in Indiana. In 2023 and 2024, state legislature came out with a variety of legislation dealing with what the high school diploma should look like. And the two most pertinent parts for our today are that the diploma needed to be simplified. At that point, we had 5 different diploma tracks, which wreaked some havoc back and forth. The arts were actually only included in one of those, which was the Honors 1, which served about 35% of our students. So we were already behind the ball a little bit. And then the second piece that came in with that was a real emphasis on job-based experiences as part of the high school diploma. In April of 2024, the State Board of Education followed that legislation, presented their first draft of a diploma that looked unlike anything that anyone was looking for. And when I say anyone, it wasn't just the arts ed people, it was everyone in the educational microcosm there. In Indiana, was rather shocked by what came through. It was an elimination of basically 2 years of high school in favor of job-based internships, job-based work. There was a very strong response, not just from arts education, but really across the board, pushing back against it. What we've ended up with is a program that looks very similar now to what used to be our general diploma, with a lot of flexibility built into it. And in the midst of building that flexibility, amongst the various things that have slid from required to either in this elective box, is everything related to arts education. And what we found going through that process from April to about December of 2024 was we had one great potential. The arts community as a whole, everything from local ensemble directors turning to their parents and saying, please show up, to business leaders in the community, came out and had a really strong statement of the arts are important. What we didn't have was any sort of relationship already formed to lean on. What we've heard Bob and Ann and others here mention here today, that relationship wasn't in place that when we were bringing it forward, we were trusted voices. And even more so, we didn't have coordination really across the entire arts sector. And we're looking at the arts sector. We've really been looking at it along the lines of bringing 4 different constituencies to the table. Pre-K through 12 education, higher education, the nonprofit organization world, and then arts industry. And as you've gotten a little bit of a taste of, Indiana has vibrant spaces for all 4 of those going on. What this really generated is we started seeing the same faces show up at our state board meetings, and had a conversation of what can we do to make sure that we're coordinating this messaging. We realized that we had really missed an opportunity going into December of 2024, recognized we had a new diploma in hand that had loose guidelines in place with relatively little structure, and really saw ourselves in a spot to be able to help shape it. So through the spring of 2025, we really started to coordinate together, identifying some of the key pieces that were going on in the particularly 9 through 12 space that they were needing, starting to push out materials for local level implementation, recognizing that once the state said, here is our policy, it then moved to our 200 plus local school districts to be able to implement those. And I think perhaps most importantly in that, we've brought together, in addition to what's going on with IAN, what we've called the Indiana Music and Arts Education Summit. This has now been 3 gatherings that have brought people from across the arts spectrum together, leaders within each of those areas. And each one of those summits, we had one in May, we had one in August, and the most recent one in November, we're each focused on a different aspect of what's going on with the diploma and coming to understand what the needs of each of those pieces in the sector are. As we're getting this call for job-based experiences in the high school space, a key element of that is working with nonprofit partners and working with our industry partners to understand what do they need to open up their spaces to be able to support the work of high school students that might be coming in for internships, job shadowing, and other experiences. For our K-12 programs, understanding what it is that they need in a partner. What sorts of resources are they working on building? And importantly, what it is that the state is asking for in those job-based experiences. And what this has really led to is just a really vibrant space in which ideas are being transferred back and forth. We've now come off of our 3rd meeting with members of the Department of Education, as mentioned by Mike, literally at 1 o'clock this afternoon. And what we're finding is as we walk in and not only have problems that we're bringing forward, but being able to bring forward meaningful solutions, being able to bring forward examples of programs that are already in place, and asking that question of, is this the sort of thing you're looking for? I think one of the biggest things that we've discovered was not that any of this was a slight to arts education. What we really discovered really quickly was that arts education wasn't even thought about as they were having these conversations. The first time a state board member really thought about arts education in this was by August or September, by which point they were on their second draft. They weren't radically revising all of this. And one of the messages that stood out most strongly to me was one of the board members who, very publicly stated, he goes, "We're not looking to slight the arts at all. Thank you all for coming out. We had just given almost an hour testimony from various people." He said, "We're not getting rid of the arts, just like we're not getting rid of football." And all of a sudden, the light bulb went on of we've positioned ourselves not as curricular elements, but as just this cultural thing that, of course, runs within the school. What we're working on doing now is rebuilding that identity of the importance of arts education and arts curriculum within those programs. As we move forward, and again, as Tim mentioned, really fortunately today, taking some of those first steps that we really had of not just coming in and saying, can we talk to you about it, but being asked, what do you have to give us? And us being able to say, here are resources that we have. And we've moved from hypothetically, we could be part of a conversation to now a conversation of how do we distribute this information that we've already built? What are the next steps? So it's really looking at a partnership of understanding what it is that is being asked for, in our case, from the State Board of Education. The legislature has stepped aside. What is it that local school districts need in order to implement these plans? And can we provide templates? Can we provide resources that make it possible that that local area teacher, who is now the one that is the banner carrier for the arts in their entire school corporation, can take that forward to their own school arts and their own administrators and put new plans in place. So it's an exciting spot. I wish we could say we've got it figured out, but we've certainly found some of our pitfalls along the way. And we'd love to be able to have a conversation with all of you about some of what we're doing if you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks to all three of you for sharing this information and the work that you're doing. I don't know if there's any questions, but if there are questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'll take a look at them because we are going to move on quickly here in a second. But let me ask the three of you a question that would probably take 15 minutes to answer, but see if you can do it in 30 seconds. You spoke so much about the importance of we're linking K to 12 to higher ed to industry, but also what you're doing is you're talking about all arts disciplines. So that's a lot to come together. That is crucial. That is so important, but that is really hard. Um, what's your 30-second secret sauce of how you've done that? Or is it just boots on the ground work?
Well, I'll jump in and say it's still a thing in progress. We are obviously very, very music heavy, and we know that, and we recognize that in ourselves. And so, yeah, we have purposely gone out and talked to people like Marielle Greenlee and dance companies and the Thespian Society here in Indiana, and just yeah, kind of boots on the ground. I'm emailing people all the time, going, "Hey, this is what we're doing. I would love for you to be a part of it. Can we go get coffee and just explain to you, how important it is that you join us and how much we want you to be a part of what we're doing."
I think a
Yeah.
key piece of this is it's a snowball effect. As we add more pieces to it, our conversation at every one of our board meetings, every public event that we're holding is we want more voices in here. And if you don't see yourself here, that's a really good hint that you need to come in. And we're starting to see some of the fruits of that as we're bringing in some folks that none of us knew prior to this and being able to really work together through that system.
Well,
And
go ahead,
just
Mike.
real quick, last thought is having a strong board that rolls up their sleeves and is willing to do the work and build capacity for building these relationships has been a big key to the success of our momentum going forward. So very important.
And thank you guys again for sharing this information and the work that you're doing. We're certainly going to keep following it. I know the website was in the chat, so feel free to follow them. I believe you guys are on social media on Facebook as well. So I think that a lot of the theme here has been what are the connections? We've talked about that, from what Bob was saying about, we've got to come together and make some connections. And now here we are seeing an example of it. Let's take it another step and talk about meeting the right people and having the right connections. And one of the right people that can do that is Chiho Feindler from the Save the Music Foundation. I'm going to bring Chiho in. Good evening, Chiho.
Hello, hello. And I just acknowledging that there's a one Q&A, which hopefully Mike or Tim can answer how is your organization funded. So just wanted to point it out, and Michael is going to
Okay,
answer.
Mike's going to answer. Great. So, Chiho, let me bring you in to talk about state of the state addresses. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but first, tell us a little about your organization for those who might not know.
Yeah, if you can bring up the slide for us real quick, just as a visual guide. And thank you. And the next one, please. So really quickly, so I am the Chief Program Officer for Save the Music Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in New York City, but national organization that donates instruments to public schools, really in advocacy of music education. We've been around since 1997. You guys may have heard VH1 Save the Music Foundation. That's our former self, but it's the same organization that is doing the work nationally. And going to the next slide, please. We've had a great presence really in state of West Virginia, which is kind of a very, in terms of the demographic of the state, right? Very small population, large state, but the small population. And there we've been having a good fortune of really working there statewide since 2009, where we have now provided over 145 middle schools in the state in all 55 counties. And I say for counties, it's a county school district system. So we're in every school district in that state. And mind you that the state only has a little over 160 middle schools in the entire state. So we're about to be in every single middle school. This was started as an initiative with the State Department of Arts, Culture, and History. We had a good fortune of meeting a champion there who was essentially a staffer and then ending up with a governor-appointed cabinet secretary position, and also with the Office of First Lady. And we actually worked with 3 different First Ladies since 2009. And that really put us on the map, so to speak, of in West Virginia. So me living in northern New Jersey and working in New York City's office, and then being able to work really directly, and then just really be on the ground in state of West Virginia. And that really resulted in the strengthening and overall band programs in the entire state. So they actually had a statewide marching band competition where when it started, I believe it was like maybe a dozen schools participating, and all the way to, I think at some point I saw about 30 plus school programs working during the marching competition. And I actually judged that every year. So it was really great to see the growth of that. And then us supporting the middle school program that is really strengthening the high school program as a whole. And that was really in line with what the state or this individual wanted to do. That led us to being really featured in the state of state address that usually happen in the first month of the year, so January, where the governor talks about the state of the state of the state in situation. In this case, a lot of times really celebrating what they have accomplished, what they're working on, and what the topic is. And we were able to really be part of that. So Mark, if you don't mind rolling down the little snippet that talks about the arts, and you guys can probably hear what I mean and the excitement of that. So do you mind playing that? And then we can dissect a little bit after.
The arts and the funding of the arts is terribly important to our state. We don't want in any way to lose our identity of how great we really are. And do you know that every dollar that we pump into arts, we return back 23 almost instantaneously. Brother Randall, where are you? Oh my goodness. Well, please stand. And we're going to I mean, what a job he's doing. It's off the chart. Look at this. I love it. You didn't even let me, recognize these 2 other people. There's a lady here, and her name is Chiho. Feindler. How about that? And she's the senior director of programs and policy, and she heads up this effort called Save the Music. And absolutely, there's packages of musical instruments in all 55 of our counties. It's unbelievable how important that is. And if she, hold on just one second. And the other person that's here that we want to recognize is our senior advisor to the Office of Senior Deputy Chairman. Good gracious. And, oh, no, wait a minute. This is the Chief Grant Coordinator. Oh, forgive me. We need you really bad. And this is Joshua Malthy. And where is he? He was saying, thank you, sir. Now we're on the home stretch.
All right. So what you saw was that us Save the Music being recognized. The second person, the governor really didn't introduce him, right? But he was part of the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts. So really focusing on that. And then, yeah, you probably heard this clearly that the governor talking about every dollar in the arts there's a 23 in return. So there's a data at least was also fed into his speech. So as you can see that, he's speaking a lot off the cuff, but at least getting the data points there. And those are really being done because of, you saw this brother Randall, who is our champion there, championing in this for all this thing. So just really to say that for our little experience of being there, again, not being even though I'm not a resident of West Virginia, but just being involved in their day to day from the long time, that really led to that level of highlighted, and then the sort of almost like an advocacy, right? Education of how important the art is. If governor says so, right, it must be so. So that was really unique experience that we've had. But also just the messaging is that just finding the champion. Mark, we can talk about, right? What did we do? What do we hear? What about education? How do we really doing that? So that's been really important there.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is this was not your intended goal to end up being as part of this in your work, but because you met the right people along the way, these things fell into place. And just to have this happen in a State of the State address, to be mentioned is huge. To be mentioned is huge. To be introduced is phenomenal. But I know you also got some proclamations as well.
Right. So coming up with that, there was quite a bit of we had an appreciation certification from the governor, the Senate during the again certification. So these things really carries the weight. Talks about our work again, like how important. It's really not about Save the Music, right? It's really how important that shows the music education shows up in these level of that the legislative sessions, which again those are the ones who are deciding the education funding, who are deciding the arts funding and all of that. So it's the top of the mind with everybody.
And before we wrap up with you, you said you're not a resident of the state of West Virginia, but that's kind of not true, right?
Well, I don't have the key, but I do have a honorary West Virginian award that we were given by the governor. I was given by the governor. Now he's a senator. So I do claim, and then I personally have been to more than 40 counties out of the 55. So I do, wonderful people in West Virginia. I really do feel closely of that, and the schools and the educators are fabulous. So definitely, I'm a fan of them, and then they've been doing a really great job.
And we kind of chuckle about that, but that actually is a piece of the puzzle of you're creating these connections. It goes back to everything we've talked about. The connections you've created there are things that we can look for as in the work that we're all doing. And just a couple last words. I'll put this slide back up.
Mhm.
You know, as State of the State addresses are coming up, I'll direct you specifically to the National Governors Association website where you can find
Yep.
out when your State of the State address is. But these questions are really important to be paying attention to. as you're going through those. And we're going to send the slideshow out, so you don't have to write all this down here. But Education Commission of the States also does some tracking of education-related proposals. So if you go to that link, you'll be able to see the 2025 one. So, Chiho,
Yep.
thanks for joining us and talking and sharing your experience.
Thank you so much for letting me share.
Absolutely. And I'm right now, we're going to briefly bring Claire Krieger Boaz in from NAM to talk a little bit about, what are the calls to action? What did we get out of today? Claire, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I've been furiously taking notes. I've been doing this work not as long as some of the folks on this call, but about 11 years now. And thinking back to, I don't know if you want to share your screen right now, Mark, or somebody is sharing a screen. Is that supposed to be up? Okay, great. And back when the Sport Music Coalition was first getting off the ground in Indiana and Iowa, I saw we have Robin Walenta on here and some others, and I had the opportunity to go to Indiana during Grand Nationals every year and work with the Indiana Coalition and sit in some of those meetings in the early days and watch it being built. And we had 18 other states that were involved in that, and it's so interesting. Indiana is talked about a lot as an example of when things were good, and then COVID hit and people kind of were deeply involved in other pressing issues. And it's so I would say one call to action is, no matter how good things feel, never take your eye off the ball. You have to constantly be reading education publications, talking to your colleagues, reaching out to the organizations and associations that are listed on the Music is Education website and some of the other links. We're all really here to help. And Bob talked about mentorship. I think we can all provide some kind of mentorship depending on the space that we take up. So what I love to is the outline of the coalition that was mentioned in Indiana, and many other states are following in this style of bringing together pre-K through 12 nonprofit, arts industry, higher ed. And it really does take a village. And a couple of things I heard here today: connections, number one. Relationships is everything. I've known some of you in many different roles. Mark, you and I worked together when you were in the industry side, and now you're doing this great work directly in the MEAs, and you take the work with you and you take those relationships with you. So I agree, that's extremely important. I would say one of the things would be to reach out, go to your local music store or other arts supplies store, but music store is sort of my thinking. We have a lot of retailers that are very interested in getting involved in advocacy, or they already are. They know the school district, they know what's going on, sometimes before the rest of the community does. So get to know your local retailer, stay connected with the folks on this call, attend every webinar, every meeting you can. You'll start to hear overlap between these coalitions. There are many coalitions doing similar work. And generally NAM focuses at the federal level, but we've reinstituted the Sport Music Coalition to get industry involved at the state level, because we agree with this coalition that the states are really where the action will be and where it is going to be key. Even more so at the local level, you have to be on the docket at school board meetings and have concerts, invite your ball makers to your business. And I would just say, keep believing, keep hope alive. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's really, really hard and it feels insurmountable. But the one thing that we've learned over and over and over again is, if you can get in front of someone with a kid who tells a story about what music meant to them, that nobody wants to get rid of that. They want to talk about how they don't have the funding. So if you can come to them with some solutions, which we can all help with in one way or another. Mark, I was thinking too, are we opening up to any questions from the attendees? Does anybody here have any questions?
I'd like to lift what Trina had said. She said, I'm focusing on getting outside of the arts bubble to get across that fine arts builds human skills. We have to not only focus on the top down with policy, but the bottom up with young parents, knowing how important these courses are. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Trina, for that information.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so Claire, thanks for that great summation. In the interest of time, we are going to wrap up here. But if anyone has any other great takeaways that they have, please feel free to put them in the chat. And Anne just put another question in there if there's any topics you'd like to discuss during our February webinar. And speaking of our February webinar, future webinars. One will be on Thursday, February 5th, and then on Tuesday, March 3rd. The February 5th one is going to be about model legislation, and we're going to try to do some peer networking. So that's why we'd love to hear from all of you about some things that maybe you heard from tonight that you would like to discuss with your peers next month. But part of that is also going to be the model legislation from NAFME. I'm going to turn it over to Amanda Carhughes from NAFME. If you can give us a plug briefly about what that's going to be.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Well, my colleague Jasmine A. Sutton and I will be sharing the Maestro Act, which is state level model legislation we've created to help support arts education. I'll say this is the culmination of a 2-year project that's partially funded by the Music Man Foundation and the CMA Foundation. And it's addressing a lot of the policy issues that Bob already mentioned when he went over the survey results. It's looking at how we fund arts education at the state level, some of the requirements for music ed participation in grades K-8, the high school graduation requirements to include arts education, or to at least have a diploma seal that recognizes arts or STEAM participation, and also the workforce issues, how we can better recruit and retain arts educators, including mentoring, professional development, and what the preparation program looks like. So we'll be sharing details about that and some of the accompanying advocacy resources. It's already been shared with our state MEA leaders. This is really intended for them to be more proactive in their advocacy work and to help them do that and to form coalitions to get bills introduced. But we're going to make it publicly available to all arts education advocates at the end of January. So stay tuned.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. We'll look forward to that next month. The registration link for February is in the chat. It will also be at musiciseducation.org. Remind you to go visit there. Check out Carl B that we talked about earlier. The recording of this webinar will be posted on the YouTube page, and that also eventually is going to be housed on the Music is Education website. Lots of information shared here tonight. Thank you all for being with us. We will send out the slides. We will also, as I said, the video will be available, and all of that's coming at you, so you can dissect everything that you heard in the last hour because it was a lot. We want to thank everyone that helped to make this webinar possible today. They're all listed on the screen. I'm not going to go through reading them, but I just want to very particularly thanks Dr. James Weaver and everybody at Music for All for handling kind of the technology behind this and providing the Zoom room and the registration, because that is really important. The members of the coalition will stay on here for another 5 minutes or so. If there's anyone that has any questions they'd like to directly discuss with us, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, we hope to see you in February. Thanks for being with us.